Hi, thanks guys. So it's really nice to meet you. We're going to talk about a few things. I'm going to talk about myself and give you a little bit of my background and my career story to give you a sense of how I figured out I was a product manager. And then I want to give you a little bit of a personal philosophy / a good philosophy for product managers to have. You know, when you think about well, what's the primary thing that can drive a great product manager? Just give you a sense of that. And then we'll talk about the broader kind of market a little bit. What do product management jobs look like? What kind of skills do you generally need to have? What kind of things can you build in order to find and create that presence for yourself? And then we'll switch into questions and answers. If you do have a burning question, just go ahead, signal it's some such, and we'll make this a little interactive. But don't be shy about questions when we get to that point, especially as well, because I really want you guys to walk away with an understanding of what it's like and what you can do to pursue this path in life, which I love. I love doing this kind of work. So I'm Fred Chung Rutherford, and I'm pretty awesome at what I do. And I want everyone to understand why I'm saying this, right? This is the first thing to think about when you're going down these paths as a product manager, okay? A lot of your job as a product manager, what it boils down to is talking to people about opportunities and why we need to do this thing, right? When we talk about opportunities, what we really mean are people. So a great product manager is often looking at this group of people needs help to do something, right? That's the basics of almost all of it. If you're a software product manager, you're trying to figure out this person over here, this group of people over here really want to take pictures and they want to filter them. And I think that there's something that is fun about this, but it's not just taking the pictures. It's they want to be able to publish them everywhere. They want to send them to all their friends all at once. They want people to be able to comment on them etc. So that's a pretty broad description of Instagram, right? And that's how that product evolved, is some folks thinking about people that have this esoteric, strange problem that might not have been well identified, that they identified and then grew into Instagram what it is today. It's a word like Google. It has cultural value when you say that word it describes something. So you as the product manager are often looking at people that need help and how do we help them and how do we actualize that into something, which means you are constantly talking to people and describing these problems and describing these ways that people need help, right? And often getting no as the answer. So the first thing, the very first thing, the beginning for every great product manager is resilience. And part of that resilience is just reminding yourself, not from the perspective of the Dunning-Kruger effect, I'm going to define this for you really quickly, is a thing that can happen to folks that have a lot of confidence but lack expertise. So in that situation, someone will lack expertise a certain area and say that they're the greatest at X. So I've never played golf before in my life, but I'm the best golfer you'll ever see. So then they'll go to the links and then they'll play golf and they're terrible at it. They won't see that they're terrible at it, etc., right? So that is overconfidence in a negative way because it affects your performance. Most of the people that I've met in my life, especially on the path of product management, tend to not have that problem. I've actually met very few beginning project managers, folks that are wanting to do this kind of work, whose first statement is, "There's nothing you can tell me about product management. I know everything already." I've literally never met that person. What I have met are a lot of people saying, "I don't know if I can do this. I think that I can. I'm not really sure. I don't know if I have the skills that are needed. I don't know. It's usually this other place. It's a lack of confidence in their abilities. And so if this is your starting place, and you enter into an industry where you hear the word no a lot, that can hurt. So the starting place is you have to remind yourself, not from the perspective of, I have never played golf before and I'm awesome at it, but from the perspective of, I'm smart. I can connect with people. I know how to work. I know how to do analysis. I can research. I can build the skills that I need to build in order to become great at something. I can learn. If this is your starting place, it's pretty awesome, right? Let's come up with an 8th one. I'm honest. I'm literally, well, I'm so honest that I don't know if I can say literally. I like to think of myself as very honest because I tend not to deceive, which means sometimes I use waffling words like when I talk. It's one of the things I work on is just making sure not to have those waffle words like in there. So I'm very honest. And sometimes we use honest as a pseudonym for destructive or brutal. Oh, that's terrible. What is that? What kind of color is that like for a thing, right? That's a form of honesty, but there's another form of honesty where you tell people, that watch looks very high-tech and is awesome. I love Apple Watches. I think they're great. That is just as honest as anything else. And again, it's that line between I'm just saying something very truthful and I'm saying something flattering in order to get something or to say something. It's another version of that Dunning-Kruger effect, like in action. So from that honest space, you need to look at yourself and make those assessments and see reality. So the reality is those qualities, those kind of things that I described, I do have those. That's why I'm awesome at what I do. They're all skills. They're all, therefore, things that you can cultivate. Therefore, everyone can also be awesome. And the starting point is to be honest, but to know the difference between cruelty and objectivity as much as possible, like in a world, because it's a subjective world and we're all making our own decisions. So for me, the key to product management is helping people, is really understanding how do I help someone else be successful. And I think that that's really the root for great product management. Like user-centric design, user-focused problem solving. It's just another way of saying people. People-first design, right? So from my perspective, I'm trying to figure out, as a product manager, here's a group of people that need to be helped. How do I help them do something as awesome as a corgi jumping over a hurdle? And that's the thing I'm always aiming for. Which gets into the core of like what makes a great product manager, right? Do you see people? Can you do data analysis? Can you look at big picture trends of data and think about how do these big pictures translate into human beings? Am I grouping human beings like in ways that make sense? Am I really understanding something about the behavior? Can I make decisions? That one thing I just described, that's an endless activity. Because it's never quite right, always be a little better. You're always probably going to get something wrong. You never want to assume that you're going to get something wrong, but you could. So that data analysis is its own cycle. So part of being a great product manager is learning how to make decisions as well and commit to them. There isn't always a right answer. There's just your answer in that moment. Product manager is a mini CEO. Okay. Just so we stay on the same page about something. That statement is always like amazing, and it sometimes paints a picture for people because it paints a picture of what we think a CEO is, especially like a great CEO. And in our pop culture, we have assumptions about what a great CEO is. And sometimes it would look something like this. I want you to hit the brakes and make sure that we've got marketing taken care of. I want you by Monday to have this other thing done. Make sure that we've got everybody. Have you got my coffee ready? Okay, you haven't yet? Good. Like somebody kind of barking orders like at people, right? And there's a tamer version of that sounds kind of fun too, of like you're sort of like the boss and moving things around. The reality is that most great CEOs don't operate like that at all, except for on TV and maybe for the purposes of presentations. Great CEOs tend to almost have more of a service role. I would argue they do have a service role more than anything else. They have a team of people that they've got around them that all have roles to fill. Maybe a marketing role, maybe an engineering role, maybe a program management role to help keep things like organized, maybe a sales role, right? So you've got people around you doing all sorts of work. They know their jobs. They're experts at their jobs. That's why they're working with you, right? If you're literally the CEO, you most likely hired them, had something to do with those people still being in their jobs on some level, right? They don't need you to do their jobs. They don't even necessarily need you to tell them what to go after for their jobs. What they often need is help doing their jobs. And above everything else, that means decisions. I have 3 options. We have to decide. I'm not sure what to do. What do you think the best option is? I'm not really sure. That's why I'm asking for help. Okay, let's break this down. Let me help you make this decision. I have these 3 things that I need to do, and I'm not sure which is the right one. Can I run them by you? Of course you can run them by me. What do you think? Should we analyze this? No, I already know it's the second one that we need to do because that's going to help us like with our quarterly projections, right? So it's the difference between managing a team and the sort of the HR version of being a boss. The HR version of being a boss is you're approving vacation time, you're setting salary, etc. Now, there's a part of that job that you do as a CEO that you probably won't do as a product manager, especially with the matrix teams that you're on, right? So set the HR parts aside. The parts that you will do are the parts where you are making decisions and filling a role on that team. Making decisions doesn't necessarily make you the boss. In fact, I'd argue it can be a toxic relationship that you can develop with the team if you are the boss. Because boss means do what I say. Versus, I have a role on the team and my primary role is helping us make decisions and really understanding the direction that we need to go. On top of that, if you are a CEO, you literally report to a whole other group of people, a board of directors. And this is probably the key to really understanding what a great product manager does. If I'm a good CEO, if I'm a great CEO, if I'm an incompetent CEO, it doesn't matter. The board of directors will have established for me a set of goals that I need to meet, most likely fiduciary goals. Grow our business by X percentage. Hit this revenue target of Y. Cut costs by Z. Maybe even more of a goal than that, maybe even more strategic. We need to find $1 billion. Find $1 billion for us. Okay, well my tactics would be, or my strategies would be, grow business, cut costs, etc., right? Whatever those are, those become key performance indicators for the performance of the CEO and the company at that point, right? The CEO isn't making those numbers, that's probably going to cause them stress. So that's the other thing that you're really looking at is, well, how are my key performance indicators doing? Am I helping the team do the work they need to do to help us meet those goals? Help us make our metrics, right? So as the CEO, you're always reporting to somebody. So if the idea you had about product management being the mini CEO, or if you've even witnessed this in the workplace like somewhere, chances are that product manager might not be the most fun to work with, might not be the most productive, but you certainly can be, because you'll understand what a mini CEO really means. It means someone who serves their team to help them also be so good at their jobs that they're like a corgi jumping over a hurdle. That's how amazing. And your indicators for that will be metrics that you use to report to your manager, your stakeholders, your company, whatever that role is. So the qualities like of a good CEO are qualities that a lot of you probably possess. If you don't possess them, you can certainly cultivate them. Listening, being thoughtful. If you're the person who can hear a whole bunch of information from a bunch of different sources, and then your friends come to you and say, can you break this down for me? I don't really get this. And you're like, oh no, it's simple. It's this, 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 and this. Does that make sense? Totally. Thank you for explaining that. It's product manager quality. If you tinker. Oh, boy, you know what? In this paper towel rack, if I took some Sugru and just molded some things like right here, it would hold the paper towel like in place. Problem solver. Someone who's willing to jump in and try to solve the problem. It's another good sign that you're probably a product manager. Especially if you're trying to solve problems that affect other people. Staying away from the psychology of that. But literally, like you see someone who needs help, or you're like, I think we could fix that. These are all signs like of a good product manager. So the path to becoming like a product manager, no one is born doing this. Everybody has to learn and figure out, how do I take on like this job? Start from that place of resilience, right? Because you're going to hear no a lot. If you tell yourself no, that's another no on your path to this success, right? This path to this thing that you want to do. So if you can tell yourself yes, if you can look at yourself and say, here are things that I'm great at, here's stuff that I should work on. I can work on these things. I can do all of these things. I can be honest about it. I can be awesome. If you can be your own cheerleader, that's part of it. And part of that cheerleading is learning the skills that you need in order to be successful. So, what does that mean? It's great as a grounding if you've got some kind of domain knowledge like about an industry, right? Like, I've worked in media for this much of my hairline. I think it was here. It's about here. I think I had a ponytail way back. So that's some of my inside baseball, is that I understand the mechanics of the media industry and how that works. So that's a good grounding to have in an industry. The skills that you develop as a product manager, I've found, are often translatable like into other industries. But the starting point for you is always better if you have a grounding like in some industry. I guarantee you that everyone in this room has a great grounding in some industry. It's probably the one you've been working in for most of your life. A technical background. So what does that mean? Sometimes the no that I've heard from students or people trying to convince themselves out of doing this kind of work is that, well, I've never been a developer, or I've never been a programmer. We had a great way to overcome that particular no with just earlier. It's like, hey, take a class and learn how to build like a website, right? It's awesome. I am strongly in favor of developing skills like that, especially cross-functional skills, any chance that you can get. But is it strictly necessary? I'd argue no. because in this industry, especially when you're talking software product management, it's just having some kind of grounding in technology and not being afraid of it and not being afraid to have conversations with engineers. If talking to people that know more than you scares you so much that you don't even want to be in the room, then if the goal is to become a product manager, that's a fear that you need to overcome. Take a sidebar real quick. Fear is a good thing because fear is a primal emotion that helps keep us alive, right? But we always have to tell the difference between something that's going to keep me alive and something that's going to keep me from doing something that's amazing, right? If there was literally like a bear in this room and the bear was growling at us and we all felt afraid, that's awesome because it means we're probably going to run because the bear might actually try to kill us, right? But if you're afraid to talk to a room full of people because you think they might be smarter than you or have more expertise than you in some domain, that bear is imaginary. That conversation is literally not going to kill you. So the fear is probably hurting you at that point. So technical background. Do I know enough about technology? Do I use my phone? Do I take notes? Do I use a computer? Do I have opinions like on software? Have I used websites? Have I looked at something and thought, oh, this could be better because of X, Y, or Z? It's pretty technical. Am I willing to learn? Willing to work like with the engineers? Because remember, the CEO is not telling an engineer, you need to code it to this specification, and here's the way you're going to build this, and I really need you to make sure that it follows the MRSS 2.0 spec plus like the extra nodes that have been applied like by that particular brand, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You don't need to know that because your team should know that. They're the ones that have to have the domain expertise in that area. If you're telling them what to do, you're probably micromanaging them. If you are enabling them to come up with solutions and being able to clearly identify the problem that needs to be solved and then making sure that their solution solves the problem, which should most likely always be from the perspective of an end user, you're good. Last bucket, communication. Can I talk to people? Can I stand up in a room, can I stand in front of a room full of people and try to connect and talk to them about like some subject? Can I hold their interest? Can I move on even when I don't? Can I write clearly? Can I create decks? Right? If you're in your honest assessment, you're awesome in all three areas, fantastic. You've probably been a product manager for a very long time and just not known it. Now it's time to just walk through that door. Most of us have some area in here that could use some development. Most of the people that I've seen walking into software product management, this is typically the one that needs the most work. It's communication. Like, how do I present myself? How do I present myself honestly? How do I make sure, I keep coming back to this word because it's at the very least the one thing I want everyone to walk away with. How do I make sure that when I say the word honestly, I'm not using that as a euphemism for negative? They're not the same thing. Honesty is just about an honest assessment. That can be positive, that can be negative, that can have neither one of those values attached to it and just be as you see things, as transparently as possible. I don't know anything, I'm not technical enough to do this. Really? Are you being honest at that moment? Or are you just saying no to yourself because you're afraid of an imaginary bear? I don't know. This is not psychology. You don't need a computer science degree. You don't need to be able to speak babble. And again, learning to code is useful because coding's kind of awesome. It's a form of poetry when you get down to it. If poetry is all about the economy of words, great code is about the economy of instructions to do a thing. There's a lot of similarity between them. You'll find in your careers, you may have already found, if you've worked with software developers, a preponderance of musicians among those folks. That makes perfect sense to me. There's a lot of crossover like in the way you think about these disciplines. And like anything else, learning it is fun and it's useful, and you can get a lot like out of that. Heck, sometimes it can be like a team building thing. I found that like in the past, I took on a challenge to learn jQuery, which is a framework. This is a much earlier version of this. And by the way, I'm a bad developer. That's me also being honest. That's not me being negative. That's me being honest. That's why I'm a great product manager and not an engineer. But it was a good team building exercise for me to learn that, because I could just ask questions like of the team about, hey guys, like I'm trying to solve like this problem for this class. Like, what do you think about this? Don't solve it for me. I really want to understand this, but like, can you help me understand like the concepts? Can you help me understand the grounding, etc. It's also fun too, because you can just like build things like when you want to build them to a certain extent. But the best product managers can come from a technical discipline, but usually the thing that's tipping them over is that they're great communicators. A guy in my last class, he was so much fun to work with, and he kind of nailed it for himself at the beginning. He said, I'm paraphrasing him, that I'm the engineer that everyone will talk to because I can talk to other people. Communication. He is well on the path like to being an awesome product manager, and I'm looking forward to seeing the first stuff that he produces. How businessy do I have to be? Right? I have an MBA. I actually used to do some sales, so I've done both. I agree with this. You don't need an MBA and you don't need to be a salesman. It's helpful because all of the information and the skills and the things that you've learned in your life, when you bring them to bear in a profession that you love, those skills will be useful. So yeah, all the stuff I learned, it's awesome and it's helpful. Do I need it? No, not really. Like a lot of my colleagues that I've worked with over the years, like they don't have like some of this grounding. I'm the one that can probably generate like certain types of analysis like faster than some of my colleagues, but they can still do the analysis and they still have like that perspective. The key is like, do you understand basic business concepts? Like, how much does something cost? How much revenue do we generate from that, right? One thing that I found to be really useful, especially like for great product managers, is being able to think like a business person in a good way, and that means that you think about the cost before you think about the revenue more often than not. If you're on the sales side of things, you're always thinking about the revenue first, because the cost is not something you have to worry about. But if you're like a mini CEO, it's the balance like between those two things. And really understanding the cost is how you're really going to understand like the profit potentials. Sometimes it can drive you too, because it can help you think about like new markets. This thing is going to cost this much, and we focused it at this group of people. But if we add this one more other feature, we might be able to get this other market. This cost is very incremental, but we might have doubled the size of like our market at that point. So understanding the cost can help you understand the revenue picture that you need to build in order to find profit more than anything else. Understanding opportunities and what that looks like is really important. I was babbling about this a little earlier. Is everyone familiar with podcasting? That's been around for so long, right? Podcasting is considered a subset of the radio advertising business, in terms of like being tracked. Podcasting is a $17 billion advertising business. If you compare that to the overall size of the market for television advertising, what we call television advertising, because that whole universe is changing right in front of our eyes right now. It's a very small drop, right? Would anyone like to guess how much revenue podcasting generated in 2016? $116 million. Anyone like to guess 2017? $220 million. 2018, $300 to $400 million. By 2020, it's expected to be $500 to $1 billion, right? As a product manager, that's something that should set your mind off. Oh, two things, right? First is, wow, 116 million out of 17 billion in 2016, but podcasting's been around forever, so what did the universe look like for the 10 years before that? Was it like this steady growth? Like what changed? Did anything change? The other thing to look at is that it's essentially that line goes like this, is that trajectory going to maintain itself? If I leap into that trajectory, can I participate in that growth? Is that real growth? Is there any sign of like a cliff like sort of appearing, right? That's the kind of business that you want to be doing and to be able to see. And anybody can do that. Just looking at some numbers and being able to go, whoa, oh yeah, this line looks like this. Okay, that's a big opportunity, right? As you get great at product management, you start looking at much smaller incremental opportunities. And that's the level of business that you really need to be successful. So having like the other qualities, they just help you be better at it. Help you move from being good to great. Do you really understand an industry? The better you understand an industry, the more you can bring to it. The more you can use that to leverage into the thing that you want to do. Maybe, for the sake of argument, maybe the reason you want to become a product manager is because you hate your industry. That happens. I'd say, though, that even if you do, find the love for what you've done and for all the experiences that you've had. Because when you do, you can look at that and go, well, I have this wealth of knowledge. Maybe I can use that wealth of knowledge to build this other career path for myself, find success, build up these other skill sets, and then move into new industries. Arguably, that's one of the broader problems that the media industry has faced over the last decade, is that folks in the industry got so entrenched in their domain knowledge that they couldn't pivot into the emerging opportunities that were appearing. The best big picture example I can think of is iTunes, which I know is terrible software, right? If you love it, more power to you. But when iTunes was first invented, right, it was solving like a problem because there was this emergence of devices and MP3 players and just different ways that you could get music. And the only clearinghouse that really had a whole bunch of music all in one place was this company called Napster that was essentially abetting the stealing like of music like from a lot of different companies. So the record industry's reaction like to this was, we have to shut that down. We have to crush like this company, because it doesn't occur to them that, oh, these files could just be another version of a cassette tape or an album or an 8-track tape or a CD. There's something about the digital file that just didn't quite compute for a lot of the folks in that industry at the time. And so if you think about those formats that I just outlined, right? Those formats all require cooperation within an industry. Like, yep, we're going to all agree to use like CD format. We're all going to agree to use vinyl format. We're all going to agree to use like these formats in order to play like our music, right? No real agreement in the industry for this. So Apple sees that opportunity and says, wow, okay, that's problem one that we can solve, is coming to some kind of agreement with the format, the forms of that music, right? Apple sees another problem in the industry, which is, holy guacamole, there's all these different types of players. Those players don't have a great way to just go get the music. And it's confusing because when you start to get music for one type of player, it doesn't really work with another type of player. So, was their answer to come out with the first music player? No. Was their answer to come out with the first music store? No. Their answer was to look at how other people had iterated on a problem and failed and say, how do we bring this together into this cohesive experience that changed our culture? Everybody's got a smartphone in their pocket. They all look about the same. They all look like a brick, right? Even if you have an Android phone, arguably its form factor, basically an iPhone, right? Would that iPhone exist without the iPod? Compare the form factors, look at them. They're so close to each other. People had a problem that needed to be solved. Other folks were trying to solve the problem in different ways. And then a whole industry of folks, like within the media, couldn't see it. Then a whole other company then came in. And then that's the music industry that we have today. which Apple is arguably abandoning because Spotify and other companies have figured out how to actualize in a world of always connected devices and an always on internet. Do you even need to carry the files around anymore? Don't know. That's the kind of business that you need to understand. And if you understand an industry well, you can use that to leverage up your opportunities. So those buckets, if you think about it, what it means is that you as the PM, you as that mini CEO, you're doing some marketing, you're thinking about business because you're looking at people that have problems to solve, right? You have some kind of understanding of engineering because as you develop skills, maybe your grounding is as an engineer, so maybe you do know a little better than other folks. Here's what the cost side of the equation looks like. Design, right? That communication element, like how do I appeal to people? How do I do things that make sense to them in a way that's going to grab their attention, right? In a vacuum, you probably could do all of these disciplines, but in a well-actualized team, you're at the center of all of these disciplines and offering your expertise and opinion against them to help other people do well at their jobs, because then that's the success of the team. And so then you're entering the market and you're trying to figure out, well, what kind of a product manager am I going to be? Because there's so many different kinds, right? There's very general product managers, right? Like at Amazon, you can pick almost any component of Amazon.com's ecosystem, from the warehouse to the robots that are in the warehouse, to the pull and pick software that's running the warehouse, to the communication system back, to their finance systems, to Amazon.com, to the Amazon apps, to the interconnected systems that are out there, to Alexa. And out of that list that I had, each one of those things probably has anywhere from 10 to 100 product managers associated with it, all working on some subsystem of that. So some sort of generalized discipline against that. Likely not as technical. Then within our Amazon example, there'll be a group of people that are maybe more technical, that maybe have more engineering skill. They've either cultivated it or they have a really strong engineering background, so that they're the person who the problems that they're trying to solve are often for other engineers and or for computer systems. So you end up sort of personifying systems as people and trying to figure out how would you solve those problems as well. So let's use a different example. I'll pick on Spotify again. Your general product manager might be someone who's figuring out the Spotify user interface for iOS apps. So I'm going to worry about the iOS app and be the product manager for that. The technical product manager might be the one that's building the APIs that the app is using to communicate back to Spotify's music libraries, and that also really understands what application protocol interfaces are and what the need is for them and how you can actualize that as a business, right? There's also another type of product role that's often available in the market, and that's just very project-based. And that's where you've got your contract to hire positions or your limited time sort of positions, 3-month contract. We have this very specific deliverable that we need to do, and we need a product manager to help us make decisions and do the analysis and cut through and help us move and get this thing done. There's all kinds of opportunities in all of these areas. And a lot of it is as you develop your skills and as you learn the market and learn how to apply yourself to it, it's learning which areas make the most sense for me to jump into. So we're going to do this show of hands, real simple, okay? So 1 means I'm interested in being a general product manager. 2 means I'm interested in being a technical product manager. And 3 means I'm just interested in maybe trying to be like a project-focused like product manager, someone who comes in and solves a problem and then jumps out. So everybody got that? 1, 2, 3. So on the count of 3, just put your hands up, okay? 1, 2, 3. Cool. Awesome. So yeah, out of those, in my experience, like the general product management positions, those tend to be available everywhere. Has like a clear path of essentially being like a full-time person, often a contract to hire like sort of position. You can come in as an associate product manager. You can come in as a just brand new product manager entering like into the industry as well. And then developing your skill set and figuring out like what that universe looks like. Technical product management, that's almost any software company you can think of. Amazon is constantly on the hunt for technical product managers. Microsoft as well. Google, although Google's titles like for some of these jobs like were a little bit fungible. And then on the contract side, holy guacamole, there are so many of those jobs. I think that I literally get, for the last like 3 months, I've gotten on the average of like 2 calls a day about something like that. Hey, we have a company based in Bayonne, New Jersey. Like they need help. Like it's a short-term contract. It's 3 months. They need help doing like X or Y. One of my friends, that was exclusively like what he did for 5 years, was he just went company to company like solving a problem like for them. So those opportunities exist, and it's still like a great time to jump into the industry. Because here's the secret: it's always a great time to jump into the industry, especially if it's something that you want to do. So just remember though, that there's no guarantees with anything. But there's no reward without risk. So that's another part of the honest conversation you have to have with yourself is, am I willing to take a risk? Am I willing to put myself out there? Am I willing to learn things that I've never learned before? If you are, good path to success. Am I willing to be honest? Am I willing to be my own cheerleader? Am I willing to be the one that will say yes to myself when no one else is going to say yes? All good things like on your path to success.